Okay. Sanitize. Knock, knock. CNA, may I enter? Hi, Mr. Campos. It's Angelina. I'm going to be your CNA tonight. I need to verify name, date of birth. Perfect. So we're going to do range of motion, okay? I'm going to pull the curtain for privacy. And we're going to start with your upper body first, okay? All right. Pull your arm out. We're going to do flexion, extension, flexion, extension. One more time. Flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction. We're going to bend your elbow, okay? Flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension. One more time. Flexion, extension. We're going to move down to your wrist. We're going to do flexion, extension, hyperextension. Flexion, extension, hyperextension. Flexion, extension, hyperextension. And we're going to do radial and ulnar. Radial, ulnar. And then with your fingers, flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension. We're going to do abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction. We're going to do that 3 times, and then I'm going to go over to the other side. Alrighty. Pull your arm out. Flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension. And from your elbow, you're going to do flexion, extension, flexion, extension. One more time. Flexion, extension. And then at the wrist, we're going to do flexion, extension, hyperextension. Flexion, extension, hyperextension. Flexion, extension, hyperextension. And we're going to do radial, ulnar, radial, ulnar, radial, ulnar. Then your fingers. So we're going to do flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension. And then abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction, abduction, abduction. And I forgot to do your arm with abduction, adduction, abduction, 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 adduction, abduction, adduction. And then we're going to do our hands 3 times. So adduction, abduction, abduction, and so forth. Okay. And now we're going to move on to your legs. Exposing just one. Okay. Going to bend. Flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension. Last one. Flexion, extension. And then we're going to do abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction. And then bend at the knee. Flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension. Last one. Flexion, extension. And then we're going to do dorsiflexion, plantar. Dorsiflexion, plantar, dorsiflexion, plantar. Inversion, exversion, inversion, eversion, inversion, eversion, inversion, eversion. And then flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension. Abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction. And move on to the next leg. Covering that one. Exposing this one. Alright. Flexion, extension. Flexion, extension. Last one. Flexion, extension. Flexion, extension. And then we're going to bend up. We're going to do abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction. Bend at the knee. Flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension. Last one, flexion, extension. Okay, we're going to move down to your ankle. Dorsiflexion, dorsiflexion, plantar, dorsiflexion, plantar, dorsiflexion, plantar, and then inversion, eversion, inversion, eversion, inversion, eversion. You're going to move to your toes. Flexion, extension, flexion, extension, flexion, extension. Last one, flexion, extension. Abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction. 3 times. All right, Mr. Campos. You're all set. Do you have any pain? No? In your back. Okay. All right, I'm going to get you nice and comfy. I'm going to give you your call light. Right over here. There's your call light. I'm going to open up your curtain. I'm going to make sure your alignment is good. Your bed's at lowest position. Side rails are up as needed. Side table is near. And your bed is locked. Lowest position. And then I'm going to sanitize and document.